Following the release of the Mortal Kombat collection, I have spent most of my time playing Mortal Kombat 2, and that shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody. This is, after all, the Mortal Kombat game I grew up with. It's something that I have a lot of nostalgia for, that I've played over and over the years, that I have a lot of experience with and have played to death. And still to this day, I don't really know all that much about it. There are plenty of characters I never learned how to play. I still can't get through the single player consistently with any character. And honestly, a lot of my playtime basically just amounts to choosing a random character and doing my best to try and win. Considering the game's age and the janky AI and just the fact that I've played this to death over the years, for a while there, I really felt that this game had kind of lost its luster for me. Right? It reminded me a lot of Soul Calibur 2 in a certain respect, where it felt like I'd done everything in it and that there wasn't anything more to find and discover. And to a certain extent, that is true. I have beaten the game before. I have played the game endlessly over the years. I have done everything I really want to do with the game. And yet, every time I do play it, I find myself really thrilled and excited. It's a really interesting kind of dichotomy because this game does have a ton of problems. It is dated. It was very unbalanced even back in the day. It does have a lot of weird button combinations and things you can do. It's obviously not as polished as Street Fighter, but at the end of the day, it's still a lot of fun to actually play. This is a child's fighting game. It's very similar to something like Grand Theft Auto or COD in that sense, where it brings people in due to this idea that it's cool and mature and adult, even though it's not very sophisticated and it's very basic in what it tries to do. And in a lot of ways, it introduces a lot of people to better, more sophisticated fighting games, Japanese ones specifically. Mortal Kombat is really interesting because it's technically this extremely popular IP, but at the same time, it doesn't really get a ton of respect from the community. And it's something that I'm kind of mixed about because on one hand, I'm perfectly willing to accept that Mortal Kombat isn't as sophisticated as other superior Japanese fighting games. But at the same time, that isn't why I play Mortal Kombat. It doesn't need to be this really complicated extreme fighting game in order to be fun. In fact, I would argue Mortal Kombat's simplicity is what makes it so universally appealing to players even after all these decades. Something like Street Fighter or Tekken takes hours and hours to master and learn and how to get good. With Mortal Kombat, it's very entry level. It's very simplistic. All the characters play reasonably similar. They all have unique special moves, but you can just kind of learn organically how to play as characters and slowly start to uncover their specific niches and their abilities and their powers and their fatalities. It takes a lot of effort to do the cool, interesting things in Mortal Kombat, and that's what keeps people coming back to it. Is that this game feels like it's packed to the gills with insane secrets, lore, tidbits, and fun little Easter eggs. Something that I think no other video game IP has even really been able to match. I think Mortal Kombat, more than any other video game franchise, excels at the developers having a unique relationship with their audience because these games have all sorts of weird in jokes and references and add in content and ideas that started as rumors in the arcade. It's so interesting looking up at the lore of some of the fatalities and some of the things that happen. For example, I remember there was a big rumor that Sub Zero could turn into a polar bear in this game. And obviously that wasn't true, but in Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, that idea turned into the animalities, which were kind of joke fatalities where characters would turn into animals and do things. Right? Things like that really make you feel like the developers were learning what they wanted to do with the games by engaging with their audience and understanding what they wanted and really constantly growing and evolving as developers throughout. And I think MK2 is a really interesting look at just how much the developers learned from the original MK. How much content they added. Things like the friendships, right? Which was obviously like kind of a nod to the controversies that the fatalities introduced with the first game. There there were just so many things added and just adjusted in this release that really make it feel like the ideal sequel in a lot of ways. And I'm not a big fan of the original Mortal Kombat, but MK2 refined the game enough to turn it into like an all-time classic. Because whenever I play it, I don't really think about like the wonky AI or the weird balancing issues or like, how limited the character pool is and all of the recolors. Like, I'm thinking about like how cool the environments are, like how good the music is, how good the sprite work is. You know, like Mortal Kombat succeeds in establishing a niche outside of the traditional fighting game cope. This is a a casual fighting game targeted at people who don't play more dedicated things like Street Fighter, but really love the idea of martial arts and being in this like tournament, right? Like Mortal Kombat excels at what Mortal Kombat does, being an accessible fighting game for less skilled players. And I think that's very, very important because fighting games have this tendency to be very, very unforgiving to new players. And it's a major reason why I almost felt like the genre was on the way out in the last decade. And after Street Fighter 6, I no longer feel that way, but looking at a lot of recent releases, games like Fatal Fury, games like Street Fighter 6, games like Tekken 8, like there is this very clear divide between like new players and like people who like obsess over this stuff and play it constantly. Like it feels almost as if like this is one of the most unforgiving new genres to get into. And Mortal Kombat, I think, at least for American players, is an excellent kind of entry point to get into the genre and understand it a bit better and get to play in like a less involved kind of format than something like Street Fighter because it doesn't take as much time to learn. It's not as hardcore. It doesn't try and like overwhelm you with like overly complicated combos and ideas. Like Mortal Kombat is just Mortal Kombat, and I think that's kind of a very, very, very important thing. And I think it's why, in a lot of ways, Mortal Kombat is one of the more successful fighting game IPs out there, is because you can pick up a new Mortal Kombat game and expect like all the characters to have radically different move sets and what they had in the original in the previous game. You can expect a lot of new characters. You can expect a lot of changes to the lore and the setting and the mechanics. Right? With Street Fighter, a lot of times it feels as if like changes can be kind of detrimental to more experienced players, but because Mortal Kombat is more casual and less like, invested in the competitive scene, like what you get instead is just this feeling of just like that this is a fun video game that anyone can play. And I feel as if most modern fighting games do not really fulfill that niche. Like I feel like there are no truly high quality fighting game franchises that cater specifically to new players or people who have never played a fighting game before. I feel like Mortal Kombat was very important to the genre because it introduced people who would never pick up a fighting game to to the genre. I think that's kind of important and kind of significant, and a major reason why I think even today MK2 is very much looked back on fondly because this is something that is universally appealing. It's stylish. It has its place in history, and honestly, even today, it has this really cool kind of vibe to it that you don't really get out of modern games, even modern Mortal Kombat games. Like this is a style of video game that's very, very stuck in the 90s. And that is really working in its favor as I come back to it because playing this, you now get a sense of like the culture and the vibe at the time. And it's something that I think is now historical relic of the period, something that I think gamers will look back on as one of the most iconic releases of the 90s. And, playing it again, I do think that, like, in spite of the game's limitations, in spite of how basic it is, in spite of, like, how limited it could be in some way. Like I I really think this is still one of my all-time favorite fighting games. Like every time I come back to it, I'm shocked by the sheer amount of time I put into it and how much I enjoy playing every second of it and just how much I try to learn how to exploit the enemy AI and how I try to improve playing some of my lesser played characters. Considering the game is almost 32 years old, that is very, very, very remarkable that it stood the test of time that much. Because when you look at fighting games in general, typically they get replaced very quickly as soon as the new installment comes out. And even after the release of the very well received Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, Mortal Kombat 2 has always kind of retained that legacy of just being the best in the franchise. And although I would kind of dispute that because I think Mortal Kombat 9 is way better, like technically speaking and content wise. It has a proper story mode, for instance. Mortal Kombat 2 to me is a very special entry in the franchise in its own right, because it does have so many things that make it stick out from its competition and make it endlessly replayable for me. This is one of my all time favorite games and something that I will always, always enjoy going back to.